There's been a small community of Jews in Tyler since the 1850s, but it was not until 1887 that five visionary men, Joseph Lipschitz, Max Rosenfield, Louis Friedman, Jacob Liebstate, and Marcus Daniel, applied to Austin for a congregational charter. And so it was in April of 1887 that Congregation Beth El came into being. In those early years, the congregational leadership was run by a handful of families, with the names of Liebstate, Lipschitz, Wadel, Goldstein, Goldstucker, Harris, Liebrick, and Joseph. These families, along with others, raised enough money to build their own temple. For the first couple of years, the community met at people's homes or in a local lodge. But in 1889, they built their new temple on the corner of University and College near downtown Tyler. This would be the home of Congregation Beth El for nearly 50 years. Worship services and lifestyle events at Beth El were conducted by lay leaders and visiting rabbis. And so it was the congregation hired its first full-time rabbi, Maurice Faber. Under Rabbi Faber, Beth El finally made the move to become an official member of the Reform movement when they joined the Union of American Hebrew Congregations in 1907. The walls of the religious school wing are lined with beautiful photographs of Beth El in the early years of the 20th century. Pictures of exquisitely dressed confirmation students posing with the great Rabbi Faber. When Rabbi Faber passed away in 1934, letters of admiration poured out from across the state and nation. One of the most touching tributes to Rabbi Faber came from a non-Jew, the superintendent of schools in Texarkana, when he wrote, "Dr. Faber was a great religionist. Righteousness, love, tolerance, sacrifice, these were the elements of the religion which he preached and which he lived. If in his pulpit he pointed men the way to heaven, in his contacts with the world and his service to mankind, he led all on that way. One of his members said to me at his funeral, 'Dr. Faber made a Jew out of me.' A Gentile, I might say in like vein, 'Dr. Faber made a Christian out of me.' All of us, in the spirit that characterized Dr. Faber's living and thinking and loving, might say, 'Dr. Faber made of us men who recognize the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, made us men without bitterness or hatred for anyone, made us men who strive to do our part that the kingdom of God might be realized in our social life on earth.'" As the first rabbi, Maurice Faber set an important tone for generations to follow, that Beth El was to be a Jewish community that worked hand in hand with the non-Jewish community to promote the prophetic visions of peace, brotherhood, unity, and holiness. Following Rabbi Faber, Beth El welcomed Rabbi David Alpert from Boston to serve the congregation for 3 years from 1934 to 1937. When Rabbi Alpert left, the following rabbi was to be a fixture of Beth El and the Tyler community for the next half-century. Rabbi Harvey Wessel came to Tyler after having served a congregation in Duluth, Minnesota. Within a year after Rabbi Wessel's arrival in Tyler, the congregation built its new home on the corner of Augusta and Shaw, near the Azalea district. This was to be the home of Beth El for 50 years. Much of today's Congregation Beth El grew up under Rabbi Wessel. The faces of the confirmands and consecration students take us back to the 1940s, 50s, and 1960s. In the late 1950s, there were a series of wonderful photos taken that captured the spirit of Congregation Beth El in those days. By the 1950s, Jews had been in Tyler almost 100 years, and their involvement in the community was integral to the growth of Tyler. Nowhere was their contribution more noticeable than on the downtown square. Rabbi Wessel once wrote a chapter on the history of the Jews in Tyler for a book on local history. In that book, he drew a map of the downtown square in Tyler, showing the locations of Jewish-owned businesses. Here we see the importance of the Jewish community in the business life of Tyler. We see familiar names like Hurwitz, Regan, Davis, Jennikov, Wolf, Gross, Listner, Greenberg, Ginsberg, Krumholtz, Gordon, Shaw, Friedlander, Edelman, Schonbrunn, Stoffman, and more. Rabbi Wessel was a towering figure at Beth El and represented classical Reform Judaism. When Rabbi Wessel retired in 1970, he stayed in Tyler as the emeritus until his death in 1983. But when he left the pulpit in 1970, the congregation welcomed a new rabbi that represented a new generation of Reform Judaism. Rabbi Jeffrey Ballin and his wife Ann Lois served Congregation Beth El for 5 years, moving the temple toward a new style of worship. As with congregations around the country, transitioning from classical to modern reform always takes time, but Rabbi Ballin opened new doors at Beth El. In 1975, Beth El welcomed a new rabbi, Gene Levy, and his wife Bobby. Rabbi Levy stayed in Tyler for 12 years, and during that time, he welcomed in a number of new families to the congregation, and he continued the work of his predecessors in branching out to the wider community. Rabbi Levy continued Rabbi Ballin's updating of the congregational worship style, and his warmth and humor and passion for community engagement remains etched in the memories of the congregation and in the community of Tyler. In the mid-1970s, Beth El's Sisterhood introduced a famous fundraiser to the Tyler community, the Sisterhood Art Auction. For 36 years, the art auction raised the funds needed to run the programs and fund the scholarships of the Beth El Sisterhood. In addition to the monies it raised, the art auction was a staple event in Tyler for decades. The Temple Sisterhood has been the most active organization within the congregation, providing spiritual, educational, and programmatic support to the temple for all these years. When Rabbi Levy moved on to Little Rock, Arkansas, Beth El hired a new rabbi named Stephen Weisberg from Lubbock, Texas. Rabbi Weisberg came to Tyler, and only 9 months into his term, he passed away suddenly. For the next year, Beth El sought the help of fill-in rabbis, such as Seymour Rossell and Rabbi Jake Jakovsky, to attend the congregation's needs until 1989, when the seventh full-time rabbi, Steve Gold, came to Tyler with his wife Cindy. Shortly after Rabbi Gold's arrival, Beth El moved from its location on Augusta to its current home on Charleston Drive. One of the most beautiful places of worship in Tyler. Rabbi Gold continued the proud legacy of rabbinic involvement in the community. He stayed in Tyler for 9 years until he moved to Lakewood, New Jersey in 1998. When Rabbi Gold left for New Jersey, Beth El found itself in a predicament. There was a shortage of rabbis across the nation, and Beth El had been with a full-time rabbi for nearly 98 years, with limited interruptions. With so few rabbis available to come to Tyler full-time, Beth El hired student rabbis from the Cincinnati campus of Hebrew Union College, the Reform Movement's rabbinic seminary. Over the next 5 years, Beth El worked with 4 student rabbis. First was David Kaufman, then Daniel Plotkin, then Neil Katz for 2 years, and finally Alan Cook. In 2003, after his ordination, Rabbi Neil Katz returned to Tyler to accept the position as rabbi, making him the 8th full-time rabbi in Beth El's 125-year history. Rabbi Katz inherited a congregation with a rich and proud history of rabbinic leadership, wonderful congregants, and communal activity. In 2004 and 2005, Beth El partnered with the East Texas Islamic Society to build Abraham's House, a Habitat for Humanity project. Beth El members were there on site hammering and nailing and developing new friendships with the Muslim community in Tyler. Beth El has also supported Rabbi Katz's development of new programs of Jewish music for the congregation and the community. The members of Congregation Beth El have been a vibrant part of the greater Tyler community. For 125 years, Congregation Beth El has been at the forefront of Jewish life and celebration in Tyler. They are small in numbers, but large in spirit.
I count you, my friend. Nothing complicated about it. I count you, my friend. Will this change? I doubt it. And I guess I knew you all along, even though it ain't been long since we met. But something tells me I'm not wrong. Friends like you, I don't forget. Have you noticed how the light has changed? A little brighter every day now it seems. I tell you now that's nothing strange. It looks that way when it's shining off dreams. I count you, my friend. Nothing complicated about it. I count you, my friend. Will this change? I doubt it. And when the going gets a little rough, and they're lining up to box our ears, we won't even show them our best stuff. We'll send them back and cry baby tears. And when the beauty of this world won't sleep, and it tries to wake us up and make us cry, we won't be afraid to laugh and weep. We'll be safe in each other's eyes. I count you, my friend. Nothing complicated about it. I count you, my friend. Will this change? I doubt it.
Beth El is a house of worship, but it is much more than that. It is a spiritual home to thousands of Jews who've worshiped at the temple over the past 125 years. As we reflect on the people that have shaped this community, we are humbled by their dedication and devotion to Beth El. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And so let us continue building that foundation so that future generations of Jews in Tyler can continue to have a place of worship, a place for education, a place for socializing, a place for family. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. From strength to strength, may we always be strengthened.